Hey everyone, we're starting early today. There's a lot of things that are happening. So let's get this debate. Where did it start?
David Wood, check. Right.
This is a while back.
We are debating Israel or Hamas. Who is in the wrong?
Oh boy. So, hey. So during this debate, I was pretty sick. So I had to keep muting. You'll see me coughing a lot. So that's something that was happening. But I was making it through. Um Sometimes we have to kind of go through it. Um, let's see. So this is the debate with Apostate Prophet and I versus Junior and Julian, and it's Israel versus Hamas. And the reason why I wanted this debate, and I had talked to Apostate Prophet because we spent time together at the debate con. He had debated with Junior, and Junior basically was like, he was wearing an F Hamas shirt, and Junior was like, "This is a resistance group," and I'm like, "We've got to debate this. Is Hamas actually a resistance group or not? Is it a government? What exactly is it?" So this is kind of why this was inspired. It is interesting how Julian got involved. I guess this is a friend of Junior's, um, but it was interesting. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure if they were friends or he was just found for that, but not entirely sure. But they did work together, and you'll get to see their opening and stuff like that. So here we go.
And we are starting right now with Junior's opening statement. Thanks for being with us. Junior, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, James. Hello to all that are on this call.
So you might notice I'm wearing a talit. I'm wearing a Jewish prayer scarf. I said I think that's important for this debate, so I'm wearing that during the debate.
I'm going to be starting off this opening statement with a presentation that I've made. This presentation is a simple one. It doesn't really, touch in detail on, the conflict that is happening in the Middle East, but rather touches on the debate subject and focuses exactly on proving who is more in the wrong. Hamas versus Israel, to me, is resistance versus occupation. This is our beautiful resistance fighter here.
Well, I'm in agreement on.
So just before I dive deep into it, the history of Palestine is actually 7,000 years old. A lot of people say Jews have been promised the land 4,000 years ago, whereas Palestine is 5,000 to 7,000 years old. Canaanites lived there as early as 3000 BC. The name Philistia, Palestina appears in ancient Egyptian and Greek records over 3,000 years ago.
That isn't false that this term Palestine existed, but I'm surprised. Why would you not want to use the word like Canaan then? Because like the Canaanites were there. If you're an ancient Canaanite, why not call the land Canaan? I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I'm like, if that's a term you just want to use. I don't know. It's strange to try to like make a long historical claim for the word, but I'm like, it's okay. I mean, if you want to, but I'm just, why not use the word Canaan then? I don't know. I think that's a interesting question.
Ago, the Romans officially renamed the region Syria Palestina in 135 CE. Arabs lived there long before Islam and continuously after Islam emerged as.
So that's a little bit more difficult. Did Arabs live there? Well, I would say the ancestors of the Arabs lived there. I think the term Arab is more of a modern term. You have like Phoenicians, you have Canaanites, Ammonites, Moabites. You have all these different kinds of ancient Middle Eastern groups that existed. Maybe these groups fused together and, people embrace the term Arab, but I don't know if these ancient peoples would have identified themselves as Arabs. I think that's an important question. But yeah, the ancestors of who are called the Arabs now were there. I don't think that that's a problem, but I think phrasing in that way would have been a more helpful way to engage this. If like I was giving this. I think that would be a more honest approach.
As a religion. Under the Ottoman rule, Palestine was recognized as a recognized demographic region with cities, borders, and population. This was for 400 years, from 1517 to 1917. So where did the Jews come from, right? So the Jews came as refugees in World War II.
Well, he has a lot of problems here with this particular argument that he's making. His argument is that I'm curious how he would deal with the kingdom of David and Solomon. And the problem is, if you're taking a Muslim position, the Quran acknowledges these ancient Hebrew prophets. I mean, if you're going to say that they're Muslim, which is a strange thing that I've been hearing, and I have to debate this all the time. If the Hebrew prophets are Muslim, then everyone is Muslim then. Like, just definitionally. If you believe in Jesus, you're a Muslim. If you're, a person who's Shakrat, Minka, Ma'ariv, you're a Muslim. Everyone has to be Muslim. Because if the Hebrew prophets are Muslim, then their communities have to be Muslim as well. So, I mean, then you can't make a distinguishment. You can't call people Jews and Christians. Just everybody's Muslim, if that's what one believes. But I do agree with you, Death Conquered. I think there's a lack of critical thinking here. And I understand. I think I think caring about Palestinians and Palestine is important. I just think that the type of representation for this should be a different kind of representation, a more empathetic, compassionate one. That's kind of my position on this, but so yeah. All right, let's listen some more.
Obviously, there were some diaspora Jews in Palestine already, right? Just as in any country, you find some Jews. But Jews, majority of them came as refugees. And the majority of them came during the World War II phase. Before that, we saw, Jews fleeing persecution in the 1800s, specifically 1882. But
so I think he's correct that this did happen. That's not false. That Jews did come from there, but that's not when Jews first started. This is the diaspora that was kind of expelled due to violence from occupying forces that are returning to the space. The difficulty is that other people are living there too, and how do you deal with this situation? It's not that people are, just coming out of the blue. I think that is problematic, and I don't think it's very empathetic or understanding of the Jewish position, but
we saw the majority of Jews fleeing from Nazi Germany and Eastern Europe during the 1900s. Most Jews arrived in Palestine under the British Mandate, not a sovereign Jewish state. Palestinians already lived there for centuries. And
I think that's true. I think the second part is true. That doesn't mean that I think that the first part has certain feelings are being smuggled into that emotionally. Yes, Palestinians were living there for centuries. There's no one is denying that. Now, were they called Palestinians then? Did they use that term to define themselves? Probably not. I think it's more of a modern kind of, taking on of terminology. We didn't have nation states either. So this is like a problem. Like the modern nation state did not exist. And I talk about this in my opening, you'll see, about empires. People didn't have these identities. So kind of retconning modern identities into the past is not really accurate. But it's okay. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong of saying, hey, I'm proud of being Palestinian. That's okay. It's just we need to be also honest that this is kind of a modern identity too. Even Arab is a modern identity as well. These are identities that have come based on the story making that we have through history. An Islamic Empire is a part of that as well. Islamic Empire does have a tie to Arabism. Like, we're ancient Canaanites Arabs. I mean, that's a very hard sell, historically speaking. And I think honest people would say no. This identity is more of a modern identity. That doesn't mean that the identity is any less true, though. I think that's the problem. Just because it's a modern identity, people want to be called these things now, doesn't mean it's false. It's just, I don't think you have to try to make historical case for it. That would be what I would say.
And we accepted these refugees. It was common. We're kind-hearted people. We accepted them in. We allowed them to live with us. Early Zionist leaders themselves described this migration as immigration, not refuge, not return to an existing state. So statehood came later, as we all.
He's correct about that. Statehood did come later, but that's statehood for everyone. Like, this is the thing that we're not understanding. Syria as a state is new. It's from, the modern eras. Egypt, Arabia, none of these were states. None of them were countries. They didn't exist. We didn't have nation states. So that's important.
All known the 1948 year through political partition, war, but not through refugee status alone. So in my opening statement, I'm going to run through 10 points. The root, Gaza as a prison, civilian deaths, the Hamas label, and the ceasefires. Then I'm going to touch on Zionism. What is it? Israel's backup, reputation, the harsh reality of the conflict, and just being honest and truth. So the root cause.
Okay, this is already very problematic here. I don't know if he knows what this image is, but it's a very, very anti-Semitic image right here that we can see right on the right here of this caricature of a Jewish person. It's very problematic. The things he just said about, let me go back a bit. The conflict did not start with Hamas. I think this is a very hyper simplifying of what actually happened. There has been tensions between Jews and Arabs and Israelis and Palestinians. Like, this has existed for a while. Hamas is one iteration. It doesn't just start there. It starts, Hamas is from 1987, but there are tensions and conflicts that need to be engaged and considered. I think that taking a nuanced approach of this. Saying Gaza is an open air prison, I don't know what that exactly means. I don't know. I think that's just a kind of it's like a catchy term. I mean, I think it depends what part of Gaza someone is in. I mean, like, what makes something a prison? How do we define that? I think it just saying these catchy terms make it sound like it's something that it really may not be. And you could say, like, Ramallah, West Bank is an open air prison. I don't think that that's fair. Saying, there's tough borders and checkpoints, I think these are valid critiques, but I think we have, hyperbolic language is very dangerous for, doing advocacy for this. Like, if I was going to take a very strong Palestinian advocacy space, I think you need to do it with empathy, with compassion, with deeper understanding. And you need to have empathy for the other community that you're discussing. You can't really just vilify Jews in Israel in doing this. And I think it's just not good advocacy for Palestine or Palestinians. Because what it comes off is that you're like this perpetual victim. Instead of saying, hey, I'm a really, I'm a person who has, value, and you need to care about me and my community. And it takes away sort of accountability for things that may not be good from within your own community. I think someone who's more honest and has accountability comes off a lot stronger in this type of position. You'd say, you know what? Yes, Israel does have a right to exist, and we have a right to exist. And we feel that in these dealings, we have very little power and we're suffering, and, but we also have situations where we're doing things that are not correct. Like our community, we have lots of people who are engaging in terror. Like these are important things. You need to bring out the nuances and do advocacy for yourself, but also do the nuances where you might have problems within this situation too. Because I think it comes off as more true and honest. That's my opinion. Um, it was very bad, and I would say the important point is that these are not Palestinians that did this. This is a Hamas operatives that did this, and I think they need to be separated. And I think that's the problem. I think that's exactly what. See, if I could really go deep into what I think Hamas is, it's sort of similar to like a mafia, and what they're doing is just like what terror groups do, like what Al Qaeda did, and what many of these groups do is that they exert power to get what they want, for whatever particular agenda that they might be doing. And I think the goal was to to do a certain kind of emotional based propaganda. They did this really horrible, evil thing, and they got everybody to say, they knew that there would be a retaliation for what they were doing, and they did. And that's the problem. I think the Israeli government should have look deeper into this, because I think that these optics were not good for Israel. What I think, if I was the Israel government, if I was the leader, I would have been like, look, I'm going to exert power on the world and say, look, we did not do this thing. You need to go do something about this. And if you don't, in like a week or so, we're going to react. That would have given a certain kind of buffer to allow for Israel to look good on the scene of the world. That's the issue that has come from this. Hamas knew this because that was what they were plotting. They weren't thinking they would actually win. What they were expecting was, hey, we're going to get a retaliation, and this is going to allow us to do the propaganda. But Hamas has done horrible things to the Palestinian people, and I think that's the sickening part of all of this, is that Palestinians as a whole are being blamed for this situation instead of it just being Hamas. I think Hamas solely should be blamed and not Palestinian people. That's my personal opinion. I understand people have differing views, but I don't think Palestinian people are responsible. I think a lot of Palestinian people are actually victims of Hamas. And I understand why some Palestinian people do support Hamas, because there's a lot of trauma and pain with Jews and the Israeli government. There is this trauma that exists, and I understand the pain that is there from this. But it's important. He said George Soros. No, I think it's okay. I think you can support both. I don't think these have to be mutually exclusive thing. I think both Palestinians and Israelis want to live in peace. I think both communities do. There's just a lot of trauma, particularly from the Israeli Hamas war and October 7th. I think really intensified a lot of trauma. I've been there 3 times, so I saw before and after, and I think reconciliation and building bridges between these communities is what's kind of needed for a better future. But to do that, you have to kind of be understanding of what's going on.
The Hamas label and the ceasefires. Then I'm going to touch on Zionism. What is it? Israel's backup, reputation, the harsh reality of the conflict, and just being honest and truth. So the root cause. This is exactly why the conflict started. The conflict did not begin with Hamas. It began with displacement, occupation, and denial of self-determination. So 1948, over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced. 1967, Israel occupies Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, following the Six-Day War. 1987, that's when Hamas was founded, 20 years after the occupation. And according to international law, occupation and population transfer are illegal under the Geneva Conventions. So this makes Gaza a prison. Gaza, under international...
Okay, I think this is an interesting thing. Oh, thanks. Hey. I think this is an interesting question. Does that make it a prison? I think that needed to be more meshed out. like you're saying, okay, there's these things about international law. I think we have to go deeper into what the international law is, looking at it, looking at what this particular case is. This is one problem that I have with these kind of debates, is that you could just piffily say, well, the national international law says this type of thing, thus it is so. I think it's really important to look at what the nuances are of the case. We need to look at precedent for it. I think that this is important things. Now, even if that case is true of what he's saying, we then have to prove that, is this a prison? What is the definition of a prison? And I think that that's more amorphous. The law does not necessarily prove that this case is a prison. You can just say what is going on is illegal, but that doesn't prove that the case is a prison. So those are two very different things. Oh, thanks. We're going to probably do the review of abrogation versus affirmation too at some point. That's
national law is not a free territory. Since 2007, almost 20 years ago, Israel has imposed a full land, air, and sea blockade on Gaza. Israel controls all borders.
But you have to explain why that's going on. You can't just say there's a blockade just because there's a blockade. And a blockade doesn't mean full occupation either. Those are two different things. Why is there that blockade? You got to have the nuance with these types of things if you're going to make this case.
Except one, plus airspace and coastal waters. Movement is totally restricted for 2.3 million people. Exit is nearly impossible. Israel regulates calories, food, fuel, water, electricity, imports and exports. The Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International classify these conditions as collective punishment, which is illegal.
There's problematic things with this situation. That's not a denial, but you would have to prove, just because there's these problematic things, you would have to prove that these problematic things lead to what you're making. Like, I think that this establishment is not made in his case.
To become a citizen of Israel, it's pretty much impossible unless you're Jewish. In 1950, there was a law of return established, automatic citizenship for Jews worldwide, but there's no citizenship pathway for Palestinians under occupation. 2003 to 2022, there was insane family unification ban blocks, which banned, residency and citizenship for Palestinians. So even if you had a family member in Israel, you couldn't get citizenship. Palestinians cannot apply, and there is no queue. There's no waiting list, period. You cannot become Israeli. So the genocide in Gaza is very important because, the claim that most...
So I had to fact check that because I wasn't sure if that's actually true. But what it was saying is, I said, is there a pathway for Palestinians to become Israeli? It's a narrow and complex pathway and exists for certain Palestinians to obtain Israeli residency or citizenship through specific legal categories rather than a general immigration route. So there are legal hurdles, permanent resident status, naturalization process, legal residency requirement. So there's a lot of requirements, and it's very difficult, but you can't make these absolute claims without absolute evidence. So there is ways that a Palestinian can become an Israeli. It's just difficult. It's a difficult pathway, but there are ways to do it, and you have to do certain residency requirements, and you have to do that. But this is the point. If you're going to make these arguments, you have to be honest about what's going on. You can't just say absolutely not. And then, can Jewish people become citizens of Palestine? That's a question. Is he going to be open about that? Like, if you're going to say that that's problematic, then you should say the alternative is problematic too. Can a Jewish person be a citizen of Palestine? And if they can't, then I don't think you should be making this case then. Personally, in my opinion, I think, Palestinians should be able to become Israelis, and Israelis should be able to become Palestinians. Like, Jewish people should be able to be Palestinians, and Muslims and Christians can become Israelis. I get that there are rules of how that would be, but I think that there should be more liquidity in that type of situation. I think that for a healthier society, I think, societies being more secular are good. Definitely you can have your religious, emphasis, but I think, the government and the laws and the rules should have sort of a secular basis, because it allows for both the majority and the minority to have equity and equality under the law, which I think is important. So
civilians were killed, where Hamas was the most civilians were killed are Hamas, is actually false. Over 2 million people are confined in Gaza with no escape. We've watched the 830-day live stream genocide. All of us did. Almost, there's estimates all over the place. Some people say it's 70,000.
I think he has to be very careful with using this word genocide, because genocide means something. Can you say devastation, horror of many innocent people dying? Yeah, you could say that, but I think when you're saying genocide, you have to prove that the Israeli government had an intent to kill Palestinian people. And the problem is, if that were true, well, 20% of the population would be deemed as Palestinian too. They're not different than the people in Gaza and West Bank. And I'm going to take you. I have a very controversial position on this. For example, I don't see Pakistanis and Bangladeshis as being separate from India or even Sri Lanka and Nepal. I think it is a part of the same kind of ethos and culture. But a lot of people are like, we're different. I'm like, well, you're really kind of like Muslim Indian people. You're not really different. A Pakistani is not really different than an Indian. And I know people are like, oh my God, how can you say that? And I'm like, no, it's just kind of true. You're kind of the same thing. Yes, you have an Islamic law that you're following, but you're not culturally or ethnically different. You're just not. And I don't know how one could even make that case. I've debated AI on that. Like, AI is like, no, they are different. I'm like, no, they're not really. Not really. They're not. I'm studying these cultures. They're not really different. So, like Jordan and Palestinians are like the same people. They are. They have tatris. They have the same kinds of food. It's the same culture, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Yes, there might be some distinguishments that you have in the land, but being the same kind of cultural people, I think it's the same thing. Jordanians and Palestinians, and the same thing with India and Pakistan, and the same. And I would say even Israeli citizens of Palestine are not. The Palestinian citizens of Israel are not different than the other Palestinians in like the culture and ethnicity and like the kind of foods and language and all of those things. Um, they're under different conditions, but I would say their kind of ethos, their cultural thing is the same type of situation. Um, I mean, it is curious. I wonder, like, if we went to the ground and we're like, do you see yourself? Do the Palestinian, like, because I was staying in East Jerusalem, and I'm like, they were all, and I guess I would say that they probably would view themselves as Palestinians, citizens of Israel, or Palestinian residents of Israel, um, as being completely different from Israel. I mean, Palestine. I'm like, I don't know. Like, especially if you're like Muslim or Christian, like you're kind of bound by the same kind of cultural things. I think that the leadership is different. Like you have. So like I was in West Bank, and like it wasn't really that different than Israel. Like Ramallah, um, uh, what was it? Ramallah, Beit Jala, Bethlehem. It's not really that different than Israel. It's just a lot more like, I guess you could say, Arab presenting people. They kind of look like me. Like I saw the people like, oh, I look like these people here. So like I look very, because I have like darker hair and kind of olive colored skin. I'm like, oh yeah, I look a lot like the people in West Bank. I look very much like the people in that area, that region. Um, I don't know. I liked West Bank a lot. It felt very comfortable there. Um, yeah, it felt very familiar to me. I wonder if Gaza was like that too before Hamas. I'm curious. I think probably it was, but I don't know if I would say, like, when I was talking to Palestinians in West Bank and you know the Palestinian citizens of Israel or residents of Israel, I felt that they were definitely aligned in a lot of things. I think people were very upset about Gaza, and I understand that it is upsetting. It's an upsetting situation, and I think for Israelis too, they're very upset by as well. I've talked to them about that. They're not happy about what's going on, but it's kind of it's a lose-lose situation for everyone, I think.
Some people say 700,000 civilians were killed. You can't tell me all of these people were Hamas. You just can't, because children make up 40 to 50% of the fatalities. Gaza has a population of 2.3 million people. If more than half are children under 18, and Hamas fighters, according to U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence, is only 20,000 to 30,000, then 98% of Gaza's population are actually non-combatants. So when airstrikes flatten apartment towers, refugee camps, schools, hospitals, UN shelters, the people inside are overwhelmingly civilians, just by the math. Calling every victim Hamas is not evidence. It's a justification for not distinguishing between combatants and families. And I assume that my partners are going to say the majority of people were killed are Hamas, or they're going to...
Let me see. I can go back. I think it's 2 million people, but we can... that may have been a mistake if he said that.
Civilians, just by the math. Calling every victim Hamas, our intelligence and Israeli intelligence is only 20,000 to 30,000, then 98% of Gaza's population are actually non-combatants. So when airstrikes flatten apartment towers, refugee camps, schools, hospitals, UN shelters, the people inside are overwhelmingly civilians, just by the math. Calling every victim Hamas is not evidence. It's a justification for not distinguishing between combatants and families. And I assume that my partners are going to say the majority of people were killed.
Yeah, I would not say that. I didn't see that thing. I think he meant 2 million, but yeah, they do. Arabs and Arab Muslims and Christians and Druze, because Druze are kind of like, it's like Baha'i. It's like an Islamish religion. It's an Islamish religion. Baha'i and Druze. And some might even argue Ahmadiyya are too, but I mean, I think if Ahmadiyya say they're Muslim, then whatever people want to identify as, that's what they are. But I would say like your kind of standard Sunni Muslims would call that. They would call Ahmadiyya Islamish. But yeah, Baha'i, Druze. Yeah, so the Druze are a part of the Israeli military as well. They're Arab too. And they do serve in the IDF. Like Arabs, Muslims, and Christians don't have to serve if they don't want to. The Druze do, but the Muslims and the Christians don't. Yeah, so I think he meant 2. I think he has 2 million in his chart here.
Killed are Hamas, or they're going to refer to a 2-to-1 civilian to Hamas ratio. Systematic destruction of homes, hospitals, and infrastructure became normal. Aid, food, water, and fuel restriction became normal. According to Lavender AI, which is an Israeli software, it confirms that 83% of the people killed are children and women. Why this matters legally is because this is the definition of genocide. Everything I just listed, killing, harming, and deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction or displacement, that's genocide, according to the UN Convention. So let's talk about civilian deaths.
Well, I think the question is, what does the UN Convention say? And does the UN say that this is genocide? And I don't think that has been proven. I think that could be a whole video in itself. We're not going to go deep into that, but I think that is a contention of debate that needs to be looked at.
Deaths in Gaza are not an accident. They're a pattern. Let's look at the numbers again. Gaza population, 2.3 million. Over half of children are under 18. Right? Over half are children under 18. Tens of thousands of children have been killed. The majority of casualties are women and children. International law literally requires a country and armies to distinguish civilians from fighters before killing. Israel has not done that. Israel repeatedly fails this obligation. When you look at this diagram, you'll see that out of 40,000 Gazans that were killed, the overwhelmingly majority is 100% civilian demographic. The overwhelming majority.
There's an issue here that I think that a lot of these things need to be fact checked. There's a lot of data here, and I think a lot of these things should be fact checked. Like, look at what this chart is saying. Is it actually saying what it's representing? we're trying to get through the entire debate. Maybe later we can like maybe if there's more time at some point we can fact check all this stuff, but I don't know. I think this needs to be fact checked. Maybe I'll look at this at least. Let's look at this. It says the demographic. I would like to do like look at real sources and stuff like that, but you know, at least I'm gonna like Google it and see what we can find. Well, I think this is super important. I think we should look at some of these fact checks. I'm just Googling what it says. I'm not doing a deep dive in this, but it says this. The claim that 100% of casualties were civilians is false. While independent and military estimate indicate that a vast majority, ranging from roughly 74 to 83% of those killed in Gaza were civilians, thousands of combatants from Hamas and other militant groups have been documented as killed by opposing forces. I would say that this is horrific and bad. And we have to understand that in most wars, there is usually very high civilian casualties. Like, let's look at a comparison. I think this is an important question. 75 to 80% recorded during the prime years of the Iraq War were civilians. So that's a comparison that we can see. If we look at what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a vast amount of the people that were firebombed were civilians. This is what happens, and it's awful. I'm anti-war. I'm pro-pacifist. I'm against war. So, yeah, I'm against war completely. I understand that they exist, but I don't believe in war. But this is what happens in war, you know, so we have to be honest about that. And I think calling that genocide is problematic, because then if we do that, we would have to call everything genocide where there's massive amounts of casualties. And I think that does not benefit to what the kind of getting to accurate perspectives are. Let's see. What else? What was the other point he said? Oh, is Gaza an open-air prison? Let's look into that. I really wish we could do deeper fact checks to just say this. So it's a descriptive metaphor than a literal designation. Human rights organizations, the UN officials, and international politicians use the term to characterize severe, prolonged restrictions. So it's just better to be honest and just say this is prolonged restrictions. This is painful. This is problematic. And I think being more honest yields better results. I think people, because you're in debates, you want to garner trust, and people, you want to be trusted, and you want your perspective to be respected. So you have to be kind of careful of these types of situations. There are humanitarian, you could say there's a blockade. I think the focus on that would have been stronger for him. But using the word open air prison was difficult. No. The AP is not coming today. This is a review of the debate with AP. You'll see him in the video. Maybe I should have. I'm gonna fix the title of this for the next one. I guess that can be looked at as that. Yeah, if I was going to have AP come on, I would have to prepare like in advance. It wouldn't be early in the morning like this. This is just like my daily review, my daily stream. I'm going to change the title. I thought I kind of made it clear that it wasn't that, but it's the debate that we had together in this debate. But you'll see him here in the debate. Okay. Let's see. Let me see. What else did he say? We have to look at all the things he said because I want to make sure. You know what? I think it is good to just like look and see what we can see. Yeah, so the ICJ hasn't done it. They're saying that independent human rights experts believe that there is, what's the word, reasonable grounds. So that doesn't mean that there's extensive conclusion, but they're saying there are reasonable grounds that there are acts of genocide. Okay, but that's not exactly what is being stated here. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm gonna change the title. I'm just gonna call it review debate part A. I'm gonna change the title of this. So after this is over, I'll do that for the next one. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, well, AP is going to be coming up here, and we're going to talk about what he says. He does a very good job in engaging with these arguments. So we'll go through the opening.
Just by the math.
Stop there.
Calling every victim Hamas is not evidence. It's a justification for not distinguishing between combatants and families. And I assume that my partners are going to say the majority of people who were killed are Hamas, or they're going to refer to a 2-to-1 civilian to Hamas ratio. Systematic destruction of homes, hospitals, and infrastructure became normal. Aid, food, water, and fuel restriction became normal. According to Lavender AI, which is an Israeli software, it confirms that 83% of the people killed are children and women. Why this matters legally is because this is the definition of genocide. Everything I just listed, killing, harming, and deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction or displacement, that's genocide, according to the UN Convention. So let's talk about civilian deaths. Civilian deaths in Gaza are not an accident. They're a pattern. Let's look at the numbers again. Gaza population, 2.3 million. Over half of children are under 18, right? Over half are children under 18. Tens of thousands of children have been killed. The majority of casualties are women and children. International law literally requires a country and armies to distinguish civilians from fighters before killing. Israel has not done that. Israel repeatedly fails this obligation. When you look at this diagram, you'll see that out of 40,000 Gazans that were killed, the overwhelmingly majority is 100% civilian demographic. The overwhelming majority. Civilian deaths don't just stop there, because you got to look at the lives affected. 1 in 43 Palestinians has lost a child due to war impacts. 1 in 43 Palestinians. Over 40,000.
I'm muted. Sorry. I think a lot of aid was blocked in because of like safety situations. So I think that that's important. What else? Yeah, I've watched the Natasha Hausdorff debate with like Mehdi Hassan. I think she's pretty brilliant in this situation. It's very complex and it's very nuanced. I think that that's the way we need to look at this situation. It's not an open and shut door case. Um, and I think it is important not to be emotionally driven, but we also need to be humanly driven. And I think Junior's position so far, he's bringing up a lot of data, but he's not. I think it's difficult for the human case that he's trying to make. I would have dealt with this if I took his position. I would have been a little bit different with this. Yes, sorry. Thanks.
1,000 children have lost one or both parents.
Did you hear everything
since 2023? That means Israel has created 40,000 orphans. Nearly 90% of homes have been destroyed or damaged. We're only talking since 2023, by the way, which is ridiculous. Then we have the Hamas label. Israel labels me as Hamas. They label all Palestinians as Hamas, right? When there's actually 20,000 to 30,000 fighters according to their own intelligence.
I don't think that that's a true statement. I don't think everybody is labeled as Hamas. I think that's a pretty big generalization. I think we need some citations for that.
Math alone proves that most people that were killed are not combatants. Palestinians are not combatants. They're not Hamas. Calling every civilian Hamas is not evidence. The term Hamas itself is an acronym for Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya. And if you look at the acronym, the initials are HAMAI. It's supposed to be Hamai. So why did Israel choose the name Hamas? Because Hamas means aggression in Hebrew. And if they use that word in the media, in the news, they're more likely to get support from their people. Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. What does that mean? Aggression, aggression, aggression. Okay, these people are aggressive. But in Arabic, it fell short because that word actually means zeal, strength, bravery. So when you look at Hamas as a group, they're not the only resistance group in Palestine. They actually originated from the Muslim Brotherhood. So Hamas itself is considered a terrorist organization because of the Muslim Brotherhood label. But because Hamas and Israel are in the same conversation, we can also say that Israel is also a terrorist organization. Since agreeing to the Gaza ceasefire, Israel has violated it nearly 1,000 times. This is the ceasefire that was agreed upon last year, by the way. They killed over 400 Palestinians. There's so many ways that Israel has failed to keep its promises in the past. And this is a known pattern by Israel since 2008. In 2008, they shattered the November 4 ceasefire. In 2012 to 2014, they broke so many UN brokered ceasefires. In 2014, all ceasefires were broken within 14 days. 2023 to present, they have...
So I looked into his argument about Hamai. That is not what it is. They said maybe Hamas means zeal. That could be it, but there isn't Hamai. That's not what's stated there. Wow. Well, thank you for coming. Lakuno. Thank you. Guten Nacht. Guten Nacht. And what do they say? Konbanwa. Konbanwa. That's what they say in Japan. There's a lot of ins and outs. We're going to do the openings now, and then we'll do something a little bit later. Or we'll do this opening first. I'll say this. We'll start with this opening, and then we'll do the next opening later. Because it's already...
violated thousands of times, and this is reported by the UN and OCHA. For Israel, ceasefire is just headlines for commercial breaks, and then we continue bombing. When a ceasefire is supposed to mean safety, it's supposed to mean people can breathe, children can sleep without screaming, doctors can treat the wounded instead of dodging bombs. But in Gaza, ceasefire is nothing more than a headline. The world scrolls, then they think, oh, it's paused. But Israel continues to bomb, shoot, starve, suffocate the same civilians it claims to be protecting. Aid trucks are blocked at the border while babies die waiting for water. Bulldozers are stopped from clearing rubble while parents dig for their children with their own bare hands. Cancer patients miss their treatments and die quickly because Israel won't let them cross a checkpoint. Every time Israel breaks a ceasefire, it kills not just people, but hope. And that hope is all we have left. So the idea of Zionism is the idea of Jews having a homeland and supremacy, but it's not embedded in Judaism. Actually, a lot of Jews reject Zionism because they believe their faith forbids building a state through displacement, war, or the oppression of other people. There are a lot of groups like
Just so you know,
I don't think he has. And we actually review it later, deeper in this debate. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of important things that are here, but I think there's a lot more nuance that needs to be implemented.
this would be the time that if you were going to divide up the opening statements the way you guys
Go ahead,
proposed.
Julian, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just gonna do a continuation of what Jvnior was saying because me and him pretty much have the same presentation. So Jvnior, I'm just gonna describe Zionism and you continue the slide, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just let me know when you want me to change the slide. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just gonna summarize Zionism into the point of the whole belief of Zionism is the idea that the land of Palestine, British mandated, back in 1948 and before that, was promised to the Jewish people. And this is a concept that Jews rejected for a long period of time because the religion teaches that Zionism is not a construct within their religion. And it's also a relatively new term that only existed for 120.
That's just not true. That's not true about Zionism, but if you go to a Seder, like for Passover, the end of the Seder always says, in tomorrow, in Jerusalem, like that, there's this promise of being in Jerusalem, next time in Jerusalem. So like there is a connection to the land for Judaism. What they're talking about is it's the messianic element from, I believe, Isaiah 2:4, where it says, when the line, with swords will be beaten into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, and there shall be no war anymore. This is the messianic pledge that there will be no war when there is peace in the land, and that's when the Israelites can return back to Judea, Samaria, Israel. So in that perspective, it does mean aggression in violence and lawlessness in Hebrew, Hamas. And Hamas means zeal in our term, but they're different words.
Years, and while Judaism is 3,000 years old. So overall, the idea of Zionism in this conflict is totally...
I don't know how you can make the claim that Judaism is 3,000 years old. I don't know what that's based on, but nation state building is probably a couple hundred years old. Like, it's quite new. You could say it's maybe 100 something years old, right? But because we lived in the age of empires. But
no, what's that word? Permissible, like what's the antonym of permissible? Like prohibited in Judaism. Okay, next. Israel's backup plan is pretty much that if they don't have Israel to their own, they have to choose whether Argentina, Paraguay, Cyprus, Greece, and even Pentagonia in the case of Israel's collapses. And also you also have factors that Israeli billionaires buy off land in case Israel were to ever.
So I'm not understanding what this has to do with the case for Israel versus Hamas. If you're explaining why Israel was chosen as a state, that's kind of separate from this kind of argument of, and I think it's a very limited, myopic view of what Jews and Israel are from this side. They haven't really. I feel that they're giving a very detailed view of what Palestinian identity is, but they're not really giving it. They're giving a very modern view of Jewish and Israeli identity, which I think is problematic.
Ever self-destruct, or
they literally just burned Patagonia in Argentina, which is breaking news right now, just so they could buy the land cheaper. Can you believe that? Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah. Next one. Okay, let me read the title since I'm pretty much going off the flow. Okay, reputation of Israel. Israel's reputation is down through the hill. Right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had to fact check this situation. because a lot of this stuff needs to be fact checked, and a lot of it's just not true. I'm sorry, I hate to say that. The claim about Patagonia being burned. There were 2026 Patagonian wildfires. It is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory rooted in long debunked Andinia plan hoax. Oh, Lord. I think we're going to have to do tons of fact checks here. There's just so many fact checks because, like,
the Israeli prime minister is a war criminal wanted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court.
This was brought up. Okay, I'm sorry. I have to show this. Look at this. I want you to see this here. Somewhat, it's interesting that Jvnior said that Julian is saying that Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant are wanted by the ICC. Who else does the ICC want? Mohammed Daif, commander-in-chief of Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam brigades. So there's an arrest warrant for Mohammed Daif. Yahya Sinwar, Ismail Haniya. So wait a second here. Are you to mention that the ICC wants Hamas leaders? There are more Hamas leaders wanted by the ICC than Israeli leadership. That's wild, isn't it? And they did see this is an honest approach. If you're going to bring up the ICC, you got to mention this point too. Yahya Sinwar, Ismail Haniya, and Mohammed Daif. If you're going to use them as their point, they are wanted too, not just Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. So, that's a tough one. There's more wanted by the from Hamas. So, there you go. You're so funny. I think Jvnior's pretty eloquent. He
committing a genocide towards the Palestinians.
He did
and if you think I'm lying, there's literally Holocaust scholars literally specifying that they are committing a genocide, and not just any scholars. Yeah, literally.
Let's see. Okay, I gotta keep doing this. I'm sorry, I have to do so many fact checks on this because I just don't see this. Let's see if that's true. I want to make sure about that. So there are scholars that do take this position, like Omar Bartov and the IAGS, and there is a broader academic consensus. But I do think that you need to kind of clearly state this in your point and show citations for this. I think that that's needed. There are scholars that do agree, and then there are scholars who disagree. So it's more contentious than just being that there is just that. So I think that's an important thing to look into. Yeah, we need nuance with all of them.
Jewish Holocaust scholars that specify that what's happening in Gaza right now is a genocide. Okay, next one. Okay, and this one, me and Junior decided to add on because it's funny at the end of the day. Ali Khamenei is 86 years old, which makes him older than the state of Israel currently standing, which is 77 years old. Okay. And also,
let's talk about the harsh reality, though. I know that was a joke, but let's get back to reality.
So, yeah, nation states are new. I don't understand what this argument is.
Them the reality now.
Okay. Gang rape Palestinian prisoner. Okay, because Israel has a tendency of raping Palestinians in the whole prison cells that they hold Palestinians in. Yep. So with the whole ratio of Israelis being held hostage by the whole Palestinians after October 7th, and also Israeli holding Palestinians in prison cells. What Israel decides to do with the Palestinians in prison cells is pretty much rape them and pretty much just treat them like shit. Overall, like, I'm sorry for the vulgar language, but it's true. Like, there was a video that came out the other day, which Israeli soldiers were literally blocking off the view of Israelis raping a 14-year-old girl. How can that be justified?
Yep. And this guy was involved, by the way.
Let's look that up. I think we need to know what these cases are. Sorry. There's lots of fact checking here. And I think just the way that the information is presented can be a little bit problematic. I'm trying to find this information. I'm trying to find like a more like neutral kind of article on this. Sorry. It's a bit difficult to find lots of information on this, but it appears that there's something going on with this, and I think they're definitely, if this is exactly what it said, it's evil and wrong and bad. So like it needs to be denounced. Whoever, if this occurred, this is horrendous and evil. So I'll put it at that.
Ben Shitrit, he was the one who was prosecuted for this because he was the one doing the raping. And recently he was seen in a video laughing with Sar Ophir, who kidnapped and tortured and killed a Palestinian on October 7th. And they were laughing on video. Can you believe that? But before we go off, Israel shot a little girl, Hind Rajab, with 355 bullets. If you guys want to check out the movie, it's called The Voice of Hind Rajab. It's an amazing movie. If you're not pro-Palestine, that movie will make you pro-Palestine. But
and overall, the Israelis treat the Palestinians like crap. They live in apartheid with a two-tier justice system that it makes it harder for a Palestinian to get Israeli citizenship rather than an Israeli trying to get an own citizenship in Israel.
Yep.
Okay.
And 65% of Israelis support the right to rape prisoners. Okay. I mean, The harsh reality is
citation for
you
that.
have 76 confirmed suicides, 2,100 attempted suicides according to Rabbi Shmuley, but 0 Hamas suicides. You want to read this, Julian?
I'll read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. If anyone still asks who is more in the wrong, the answer is lies in the media of Israel.
In the minds of soldiers.
In the minds of soldiers themselves, Israeli troops are coming home psychologically shattered. That record numbers are taking their own lives or attempting to, not because of Hamas, but because deep down they know what they are doing is wrong. You do not experience moral collapse from defending your home. You experience it from destroying somebody else's. That is the difference between resistance and occupation.
Yep.
And then we're gonna go to the harsh reality truth.
And time.
Okay. Okay, fair.
With
Yeah,
that,
we'll save this for after.
Fair. Yeah, it's fair.
we are going to switch it over. Thank you very much for that opening, and want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern, I'm your host, Dr. J.
So we're gonna in the next one we're gonna do my opening. Okay. So I was looking into the killing of Jvnior job. So the car was riddled with bullets. Yeah, it's a terrible, awful situation, and I don't think it's wrong. If the Israeli government does wrong things, you can call out the Israeli government. I think that's called accountability. And if it's wrong, you call it out. This is not a hard thing to do. The issue of this debate is Israel versus Hamas. I don't think the case for I think there's a case against Israel. There's not a case for Hamas. They're just saying, well, Israel's bad, and they just kind of don't like Hamas is sort of mentioned, and it's not really there. And I think it's exactly what Hamas wants. Hamas doesn't want to be on the forefront of the information in these arguments, and I think it needs to be. The debate is Israel versus Hamas, so that's the problem. With this case, like the cases that are brought up that are horrific and terrible, they're horrific and terrible, and they need to be investigated, and whoever did it needs to be prosecuted. That's it. This is an easy answer to these questions, to these points. But saying, well, Israel, the point is, if an Israeli does something, that does not mean Israel did it. And it would go the same way. Did Hamas order for these situations that happened during October 7th? It is very clear that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of this, planned this. Ismail Haniyeh, that's why they're on the list by the ICC. They were on the list before they were they perished. Ismail Haniyeh, Mohammed Daif, and Yahya Sinwar were all on the ICC list. So if you're going to use that as your source, then that holds Hamas even more accountable, because it's 3 members that need to be held, and Israel has 2 of them. So I think that is important to look at. I think it was not a very nuanced approach. I think it's interesting he started off with Miss Palestine. I can see why. She's a perfect thumbtack to have, for your argument. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting conversation so far. We're going to go into part 2 soon, but we're going to take a little bit of a break because this is a while. We've been here for an hour, maybe later in the afternoon. But thank you all. We'll go to the opening 2 next. I like doing these debates because we have a lot of time. It's gonna take us a while to do this. I'm gonna format the titles and stuff, but pleasure to have this. We can look at FAR 4 too. You want me to show FAR 4? I'll show a FAR 4 video. Al-Miftah. All right. See you all in the next